planet of no escape. But Blake, exclaimed Jenna, isn't it a bit like an escaped tiger going to the zoo? Isn't it rather asking for trouble? Blake's features had a determined look about them. Oh, hardly, he replied. Nothing so meek. Anyway, if you were a tiger who knew that other tigers were about to escape, wouldn't you go and lend a hand? I doubt it, remarked Villa, who was far from convinced himself. I'd be more bothered about my own survival, wouldn't you? That's right, said Avon bitterly. You say imagine you're a tiger, but you want us to follow you like sheep. Blake brushed this aside. Look, the tiger was Jenna's. I see myself simply as the astute escaped convict that I am, and I'm asking you all to join me in taking a measured chance where I believe the odds are in our favour. The others were silent. Even Callie didn't seem to relish this trip. After all, it was supposedly the planet of no escape. Well, I'm going, said Blake, and so is the Liberator. I'll drop you all off somewhere if you like. The other four exchanged glances. Well? Callie was the first to speak. 2 questions, she said. 1, do they need us? I mean, really need us? And 2, why are the odds in our favour? Blake didn't hesitate. Number 1, they'll almost certainly fail without us, and make it far harder to escape another time. And number 2, because we know something of the setup there, and, above all, they won't be expecting us. But will surprise be enough? Asked Jenna. If we're caught, the Federation will really be laughing. What chance of stopping them then? Perhaps it's all a trap anyway, added Callie. No, Blake shook his head emphatically. That's just it. They'd never try and trap us with this one. They know we'd never bite. But that's just what you are doing, exclaimed Avon critically. Biting and hoping bluff and double bluff. I don't like it one bit. But there was no sign of Blake relenting, and it was clear that he was in no mood to wait on their decisions. For Villa, enough incentive, and this was usually a question of gain, and he was game for anything. Yet, once again, he knew he, like the others, would end up following Blake on a potentially suicidal plan, and with no thought of personal gain. It was clearly a more than usually emotional decision for all of them, and Avon was giving Blake the evil eye across the Liberator's flight deck. But when the others agreed to go, his resistance finally dropped, and with a shrug of the shoulders he conceded defeat. All right, he said. I swore that wild horses would never drag me anywhere near the place, but now I'm agreeing to go there of my own free will. Anyway, Blake's probably right that it's no more dangerous for us with our bracelets than any other Federation planet. Well, we should know soon, interrupted Jenna. Can't be far now. Zen, prompted Blake. Teleport range of Cygnus Alpha in just 1 hour. There was a moment's silence, and then Callie spoke for all of them. I just hope it proves to be worth it, she said. That's all. By the end of the hour, they all felt a lot happier, although far from cool and calm. The Liberator was put onto automatic pilot while they all assembled in the teleport control room. Blake alone was in position. Right, I'm ready, he said. Now, you all know what you've to do. They nodded. They should do. They'd spent the last hour going through the plan in detail, with alternative plans in case things began to go wrong. The others were to follow Blake down in 5 minutes, but not until he had given the all-clear. Jenna was to stay on board as lookout in case Federation reinforcements were brought in, and to be on hand in case they had to teleport back. Okay, said Blake, take me down. And slowly he dematerialized and was gone. There was no need for anyone to say when the 5 minutes were up. Purely as a check, they'd asked Zen to indicate, and yet the four of them looked over at the computer fractionally before the timer began to flash. Callie threw a switch, and the flashing stopped. They were all listening expectantly for a message that never came, and the seconds ticked away beyond 6 minutes before anyone spoke. It was Jenna who broke the silence. "Blake, can you hear me?" He might as well have been dead. "Looks like trouble," grunted Avon. "Shall we go down ourselves or bring Blake up?" Villa was over by the teleport control. "We'll have to go down," he said with a grimace. "I can't even connect with him." They quickly agreed that Villa should go down to the exact spot where Blake had landed, while Avon and Callie would teleport down just outside the prison complex. Jenna set the controls and wished them luck. Then she sat and waited, wondering about Blake and what could have gone wrong. Blake had materialized in exactly the right spot, outside cell 38, just around the corner from the guard's duty room. But there was no sign of Hammond. He couldn't have missed him, not the size he was. They called him Hammy, and it suited him, because he always ate like a pig and had the figure to prove it. Blake had understood that Hammy would be there, along with this guy Pearly, who was the key to the whole thing. He was a Federation officer, and apparently quite high up. Yet, incredibly enough, it seemed that from the very beginning he had been a plant, and had been secretly building up an underground network and working towards this insurrection. But had something gone wrong? Blake decided to scout around and see what he could discover before the 5 minutes were up. He moved up the dimly lit corridor away from the duty room. The lights in the ceiling were only about every 20 or 30 yards, and, as he went, he stopped by each light and listened. At the 10th light he heard a sound. It appeared to come from cell 44. Blake wondered why he hadn't checked the cells before, and, uncovering the peephole in the heavy metal door, he peered inside. As he did so, he allowed the light from the corridor to illuminate the interior, for the cell itself was dark. A figure looked up from its pacing to and fro across the tiny cell. Blake didn't know the face, but he was surprised to see the Federation uniform on a man locked in a Federation cell. There seemed an obvious explanation. "Are you Pearly?" he mouthed through the glass. The man looked puzzled. "Pearly," he repeated the movements. "Are you Pearly?" There was a glint of recognition, and Blake heard as well as saw the word "yes," which was followed by an eager nod. Looking down, Blake was surprised to see the key in the lock. He estimated he had another 2 minutes yet. What should he do? He should really get the others, but no, he would find out all he could first. Blake turned the key and pushed open the door. As he did so, the man tried to rush past, but, grabbing hold of his arm, Blake pulled him back. "Oh, no, you don't," he began. But with strength belying his smallish stature, the other man was so determined he eventually broke away from the grip. Before he had time to think, Blake found himself thrown back on the floor of the cell, while his fleeing adversary was about to shut the door on him. Instinctively, Blake went for his weapon, but although he scored a definite hit, it didn't prevent the inevitable. As the key turned in the lock, Blake cursed under his breath. How could he have been so dumb? "Oh well," he thought, "there's only one thing for it. I'll have to get them to teleport me up. It must be about 5 minutes by now anyway." But there was worse to come. His wrist was empty. The bracelet must have been pulled off in the scuffle. He looked hopefully round the small cell, but all he could see was the customary one table and one chair outlined in the faint light. As Villa began to materialize outside cell 38, he fancied he saw a uniformed figure staggering around the corner away from him. He might have the bracelet. He decided to check. Jenna, can you update those coordinates? The ones for Blake's bracelet. 573. Same as before. Location? Along Corridor D. Villa shuddered. He had rather strong memories of prison corridors, and just for a moment, he couldn't believe he'd agreed to come. Is everything all right? Asked Jenna, cutting the uneasy silence. Villa steeled himself. All right so far. Very quiet, in fact, almost too quiet, but I'll keep you informed. He looked around. It really did seem too quiet. Where were the guards? Where was Hammy? Where was Blake? And who was that figure he had seen? Then, as he began to make his way up Corridor D, he heard a noise, as if someone were banging on the walls of a cell some way off. He tried to gauge the distance, then hurried on. Meanwhile, Callie and Avon found themselves within sight of the main entrance, and conveniently screened from view by the wall of a small building used as a guard's control point when the automatic control was out of action. At first glance, the scene seemed quite ordinary, but a moment later they were surprised by what they saw. A Federation officer was being carried along by two people whose faces were hidden, and the officer appeared to be unconscious. As this group reached the entrance and went inside, another two similar groups came into view, together with one man on his own, who was gesticulating and pointing and seemingly organizing the operation. His frame was extremely bulky, and he was a little out of breath. Callie nudged Avon. Look, there's Hammy, she said, pointing. They had known him during their time on Earth. Yes, and it looks as if the battle's already won, said Avon. So much for not managing without our help. Avon sounded bitter, yet he couldn't help but be excited at the thought of Cygnus Alpha being wrested away from the Federation. All the same, they must be cautious. They waited until Hammond, having paused briefly by the entrance, came back towards them. As he came level, Avon sprang out and, taking him completely by surprise, pulled him into their hiding place. Avon had his hand over Hammond's mouth. Don't worry, said Callie. It's only us. But what's going on? And what's happened to Blake? Where is he? Now that Hammond had recognized them, Avon released his grip and took his hand away, whereupon words seemed to tumble headlong out from where the hand had been holding them in. Blake, is he here too? But why? We sent you a message warning you of the change of plan. Message? We got no message, said Avon with a glare. What did it say? That we were going ahead early, so the rendezvous was off. Why? What happened? We discovered Pearlie in here, replied Hammond, tapping the wall against which he was leaning, when he was sending a message to Travis. He said everything was going as planned, that we were eating out of his hand. He said he would contact them again when it was all over. Hammond stood up, looked around to make sure the operation was going smoothly, and then went on with his story. We overpowered him, of course, and put him in a cell. Then we went into action immediately, to get it over early and then force Pearlie to relay the OK to the Federation. From then on, it's gone like clockwork. And you sent us a message telling us not to come? Yes, the minute we'd decided. Callie looked at Avon. Sounds like the Federation blocked it. I bet Travis has got his men working to break the code. But Avon was examining a wire he had noticed, leading across to the prison block. What's this? He asked Hammond. The large man smiled. Oh, just in case they do rumble us, we've wired up the whole block and set it to go up as soon as we've got this lot in. He pointed to one of the uniformed men and laughed. Imagine, all the Federation officers locked in their own cells and then... But Blake's somewhere in there, exclaimed Callie, looking very worried. And Villa too. We'd better check it out, said Avon. When's that thing due to go off? 3 minutes, and there's no way of delaying it. We'll see about that. Callie, you contact the ship. She'd hardly activated her bracelet when Jenna spoke urgently. Callie, is that you? I just picked up a spacecraft on the scanner, approaching at speed. Looks like the Federation. I'm preparing for evasive action. What about you? Are you ready to move? Callie explained their position. Well, you've 5 minutes at the most, said Jenna. I've heard nothing from Villa or Blake, mind you, but I'll be standing by. Go and prepare to repel the attack, Avon told Hammond. Then, if I can delay this, we'll perhaps be in some position to help. Just at that moment, a uniformed figure appeared at the prison entrance, staggered a few paces, and fell to the ground. It was Pearly, and in his hand was the key to cell 44. Blake sat in the cell with his elbows on the table and his head in his hands. He couldn't see what else he could do. He had made enough noise to waken the dead, but it had done no good. Then he had managed to weaken the glass in the door with a few blasts from his gun, so that he could break it and push through using the leg of the chair. Now the annoying thing was that he could see the bracelet lying there on the corridor floor, but well over 6 feet away. As far as he could see, it might as well have been 6 miles. There was nothing he could do but wait. By the time Villa had got nearer to the banging, the noise had stopped, and although he waited and listened, it didn't restart. He didn't want to call out, so instead he went up to the nearest cell, shoved aside the peephole cover, and peered in. He could just make out a pair of feet under the table, but the rest of the body was out of sight. He bent down to examine the lock, not noticing in the poor light that the key hung on a hook close by. He set to work, thinking how ridiculous it was that he should be trying to break into one of these cells. It must have taken him at least a couple of minutes, as it wasn't easy to see what he was doing, and anyway it was a type of lock he'd never come across before. But at last he threw open the heavy door and rushed in. Now he could see the whole body. It was a Federation officer, still breathing, but absolutely still. Villa thought for a moment. What could it mean? Well, it didn't help him to find Blake, and there was no sign of the bracelet, so no point in hanging around. He shut the door behind him, now noticing the number 40 above the glass, and quickly moved on up the corridor, past one door, then another, until at last, coming to another light, he saw first the glass strewn over the floor, and then the bracelet. He looked through where the glass had been, and saw Blake sitting at the table. "Blake!" he hissed. "Villa! Don't worry, I'll have you out in no time." Relieved to have found Blake, Villa turned his attention to the lock on cell 44, not realizing just how little time he might have left. Meanwhile, Avon himself was struggling with trying to delay the bomb without actually setting it off. It had taken him over 2 minutes to work his way carefully into the timing mechanism, only to find the adjustment lever was covered by a locking device. However helpful Callie might be, he would gladly swap her for the lazy Villa right now if he had the choice. But he hadn't, and the sweat on his fingers made the job even more difficult as precious seconds continued to tick away. Villa wasn't hurrying as much as he might. Anyway, to his annoyance, the lock on cell 44 was a different one still. Seeing that he was having trouble, Blake thought he'd use the time to contact Jenna back on the Liberator. "Chuck us up the bracelet," he said. Villa handed it through the opening, then resumed his work. "Jenna, it's Blake." He was immediately interrupted by Jenna. She didn't waste time on explanations, but came straight to the point. "Blake," she said, "you're in danger of being blown up in there. Prepare to teleport immediately." At the same time, Avon and Callie began to dematerialize with no warning at all, Avon having just managed to activate the delay, he wasn't sure how long for, with a matter of seconds to spare. As they rematerialized, Callie was still midway through congratulating him. And then everything had to be explained to Blake, of course. "It seems you were right wanting to keep away," he said at last. "We were more of a hindrance than a help. If it hadn't been for their message to us, they wouldn't have the Federation on their tails now. How about giving them a hand?" This time there was no hesitation. And together with Hammond's lot, they managed to repel the attack, for the moment at least. As they turned away, there was a sizable explosion on the surface of the planet. Avon smiled a satisfied smile. "I'm glad I came," he said, "if just for that." "Yes, and look," said Callie. "Villa hasn't come away empty-handed either." A somewhat embarrassed Villa was clutching the lock mechanism from cell 44. "It just came away in my hand," he muttered feebly. "Honest?" It all seemed a fitting end to a rather far-fetched sort of day.